Hi, I'm John Paul and a really warm welcome to this video. This is the first of two videos. The first one is about setting up your private practice and the second one's going to be about developing and growing your private practice. So just focusing on this one, of course, setting up your private practice. What I'm going to talk about is a number of different areas. I'm going to start by looking at why you might set up your private practice. I think it's really important if you're going to do it because of the amount of time and energy and focus that it needs to do it, that you have a clear idea of how it's going to help and why it's going to be great. It's all based on my personal experience, of course, but I do think there are lots of great things about having your own private practice. So I just wanted to run through a few of them first, then moving on to looking at the psychological state that we need to be in, I think, that's conducive to setting up your private practice. It can often be looked over, I think this. Of course, a lot of the training is about our psychological state and other people's psychological state, but I think it's worth focusing on the sort of place that it's important for us to be in more often than not if we want to really make the best of growing our private practice and developing it. So looking at the psychological state there, and then moving on to where you might get clients from. So that's really the place that often people go to first as far as setting up their private practice, but lots of ideas around that, where you might get clients from. And then finishing off with some other practicalities about how to make the transition easier between, say, full-time employment and running your own business, running your own private practice, looking at your location, where you might choose to locate your business, and looking at price as well, deciding on the price, your hourly rate. So, starting at the beginning, why you might start your private practice and the great things about having a private practice. Look, again, this is based on personal experience, but for me, I would say there are three key things which are really great about it. The first of those is the flexibility and choice that it gives you. I haven't worked in an organisation as a therapist, but I imagine if I did, there would be a lot more sort of processes and procedures around. There'd be great things about it as far as being part of a community and things, and of course clients coming through, which wouldn't be my responsibility, which it is in a private practice, but you have to be within certain structures, do certain things. Now, in private practice, of course, you have to comply with your code of ethics, but there is something great about the fact that you choose when you work, you choose who you work with, and there is such a lot of flexibility around that. Yes, when you're starting out, you need clients, so you will have more of a tendency to take people on, or try to take everybody on that comes through. But certainly, as I say, when I was starting out, and certainly now, that I can choose who I work with, the types of client groups that I want to work with. If I want to change my website or tinker with something or add something or do some more training and work with a different client group, whatever that might be, then I'm absolutely able to do that. That's all within my control. So I think that's really important as a primary thing there, really. The flexibility, choice and control that having your own private practice gives you. Of course, it comes with challenges, as with you're running your own business does in any industry, and perhaps at another point I will do a video about what they might be. But in this situation, holding in mind why you want to do this and keeping that in mind can be really helpful, I think. The next thing is financial. There is an hourly rate, of course, that you get for private practice, and I have looked at salaries for being employed, and certainly the hourly rate that you would earn in private practice is significantly, usually, larger than you would get an hourly rate of working within an organisation. Now, you do have more costs in private practice that fall to you. All costs fall to you. So room rents, insurance, those types of things. If you're working within an organisation, those things would usually be borne by the organisation. So, of course, the money that goes in as profit is not the whole of your hourly rate. There are costs which have to come out of that. You might get other benefits working for an organisation, so pension, health insurance, which you don't. Of course, working for yourself in private practice. Having said that, for me, and I've been able to increase my rate over time because of the way I've developed my business, and as I say, I will talk about that in the next video. Certainly, the hourly rate that I can earn as in private practice is greater. Gives a greater income than it would if I was to be employed by an organisation. So that's the financial side of things. And then I would say the third thing, which is a bit connected to the flexibility and choice side of things, but is authenticity and congruence. We hear those words a lot whilst we're training. But for me, I feel like working for myself with the clients that I want to work with, I can really focus on what I want to do and how I want to do it and what I think works well. Of course, that's taking in CPD and constant ongoing development. That is so important. continuing professional development, of course, to be listening to other therapists' ways of doing things, to be developing and growing with what clients say as well. But there is something about I make the decisions, responsibility sits with me, accountability sits with me, and it can congruently be what I want it to be, this business. So as I say, if I want the website to look a particular way, if I want that to change, if I want to be on Twitter, off Twitter, all of those things are down to me. And that has a great sense of, it has responsibility, perhaps some increased responsibility than it would within an organisation, but actually it also has a great sense of freedom for me, and knowing that everything that I do is about growing my business. So, as I say, lots of great things as far as setting up a private practice. That would be one of the reasons I would really recommend it for people. It can work as well if you're looking at the flexibility side of things, really work with families with that work-life balance. You can choose particular days that you work, times of the day. Again, you're not having to work according to somebody else's rules there. So, reasons to set up a private practice. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is so important, I think, is the psychological aspects of setting up a private practice. Look, you're going from a really significant transition here from, say, student to business owner, from student to therapist, from potentially an employee within an organisation to running your own business. There's a few things that need to be happening more or required in order to make that transition. And those things, I would say, are being more inward out than outward in. So when I mean outward in, what I mean is that in an organisation, for example, we get told what we need to do and when we need to do it effectively. We're working within usually somebody else's boundaries, rules, ideas. The more senior you get, the more choice and input you have on that personally. But largely, it could be a management committee or whatever that's making those decisions. And therefore, we're outward in those situations. When you're a student as well, you need to do things at a particular time, jump through certain hoops, meet certain requirements in order to qualify and then be accredited. And that's all, I would say, quite outward in. But when you're running your own private practice, this rests on you. So in order to do that, you need to know yourself, you need to trust yourself, and you need to a significant degree, trust other people as well. So, as I say, that transition of going from more outward in to inward out is very important. Psychologically, again, looking at having more voice, visibility. If you're going to do a website, if you're going to go onto social media, knowing your voice, being confident in your voice, being more visible, those things are all really important. Now, some people don't. Some therapists have no involvement with social media at all. Some therapists don't have a website, so that's not for everybody, but I would talk about those things more as well in the sort of the development of business, if that is something of interest to you in the next video. But certainly voice, visibility are very important. And what tends to get in the way of people using their voice more, what tends to get in the way of visibility, what makes people avoid those things is often fear. So people who spend a lot of time in fear are more outward in, or tend to be more comfortable with looking outward for their validation, looking outward for what they do and how they do it. And what I would say is important as far as the psychological process is having less fear. And that means we will trust ourselves more, because a lack of trust of self and others tends to come from fear. So we'll have less fear and move our attention more to sort of creativity, move our attention more to connection with self and connection with others. And connection with self is about knowing self, and also, as I say, connection with other people and building this community and collaborative team around us of referrals that I will also go on to talk about when I talk about getting clients. So again, so important psychologically, these aspects of things. Patience is another one. Some people, it takes years to build their private practice. For others, it happens relatively quickly. The more you're preparing for it, the more you're spending time growing it, cultivating seeds, planting seeds, the quicker I believe it's going to happen. But again, patience is important. What is unhelpful in terms of patience for people, again, is usually fear, annoyance, those sorts of things. So we need to make sure psychologically that we're sort of keeping fear managed and in control, and also making sure that internally we're in a state that's about creativity. Because talking about creativity, if you want to put up a website and do that, thinking of creative ways to get new clients, thinking of your color palette on your website, how your room might look, your therapy room. All those things put us in a place or require creativity. So we need to be in that psychological place more often than not where we're able to do that. And of course, human beings, we're in a constant state of ebb and flow. We're going to be overly aroused, frightened, angry sometimes, under aroused, hopeless, helpless, or feel perceived that at other times. But what I think is important, the way I look at it, as far as this psychological state that's important to maintain, is this place of calm and alive in the middle. And what I mean by calm and alive is not being too consistently overly aroused in fear and anger up here, or under aroused in the sort of hopeless, helpless, switched off state. Again, as I say, it's human to be in both of those states or either of those states at certain times. But if we're looking at trusting ourselves and others, being creative, at the sort of focus and determination that's necessary in order to move this practice forward, the sort of self-motivation that's necessary, the more inward-out way of being, then it's much more consistent with this calm and alive place. Now, I could spend the rest of this video talking about calm and alive and that state and how to achieve it. I would, look at our thoughts, feelings, body, behaviour, relationships with others, all as ways to do that. But as I say, it would fill up the rest of the video, and there are other things that I think are important to talk about. So in order to achieve this calm and alive state, I have written the book, Finding a Balanced Connection, and also done the online course, produced the online course as well, Life Unlimited, and they will help with that. Now, you have your own idea of what a good psychological state is or a helpful psychological state is for you, of course. That's just my sense of things, my idea of things. But the point I would make generally is if you're looking at something that's going to be very helpful from the point of view of setting up and growing your private practice, it's making sure that you're in a state more often than not where you feel good, where you're able to regulate yourself, where you take good care of yourself, where you have good relationships. So the more you're in that place, the more it's conducive to this process, I would say. So when fear comes up, I would say fear is an absolute usual part of life. It's a natural part of being human. But if fear does come up and anxiety does come up about getting clients or that you won't, whatever it might be, I would just add on the end now something which is about creativity, in terms of this new practice, something which is about cultivation, growing. What seeds are you planting? And that can be contacting a local therapist to have a chat with them about how they've built their practice. That could be thinking of your color palette for your website, or your opening introductory paragraph on your website, whatever that might be. If this anxiety comes up, if worry comes up about it, it may have important messages. It may tell you important things to be looking at and noticing. And also, I would now try to add on the end these things that are going to be about growing, these things that are going to be about, as I say, cultivating your private practice, that what are the seeds that you can be planting. There is a phrase which is, you don't have to expect success, just prepare for it. And I think that's really important, that you're using the time, at the beginning there may be quiet times. If you do have the luxury of not having to work, there will be days of time where there isn't external demands of you. So in that time, what I would be thinking of doing is, as I say, what seeds can you plant? And there are all sorts of different ways that you can be doing that in situ. You could be researching data protection. CPD is going to be a part of this. It's going to help you with clients. It all goes towards your private practice. So think in terms of how you can prepare for this practice to be coming along, and it will come, is what I believe. Absolutely, it's just a matter of time for people. So then moving on to getting clients, because if there is anxiety around, it's easy for me to sit here and say it will happen. So what proactively can you do in order to get these clients? A lot of us will go straight to strangers, effectively, so people who are looking for therapy on the internet. So how do you find or get them to find you? And of course, a website and the directories are important there, and I will come on to them in a minute. But I would focus first, actually, on a couple of other things, or a few other things, which are friends and family. Now, I know there are boundary issues around friends and family, and of course you can't see your friends as far as clients, but your friends have friends, and they have friends too. So, and your family do have friends and other family, and if boundaries allow it, they can be a good source of referrals for you. My first two clients were a referral from a family member and another one a referral from a good friend. Again, I didn't know those people that they referred. So always hold that in mind as well. And from that point of view, people need to know you're a therapist, which presumably they do. And there is very much this thing about relationship, people liking you, and people will refer to people that they like. So friends and family are absolutely possible or important there as far as referral sources. Next, I would say your existing clients. I know that might sound strange if you're setting up a private practice, but as soon as one client comes through, or you may have clients that you can take through from placements that you have, all of those people, those clients are going to be potentially great sources of referrals. They might return, and a good proportion of my clients now that I see as part of my private practice are actually returning clients. So clients might return, but they will absolutely recommend you to other people if they've had a good experience. So again, rather than always focusing on people that you don't know, it's important to focus as well on the people that you do. As I say, there can be existing clients, friends, family. Also, I would say incredibly importantly here is setting up a sort of network. I don't like the word networking, I'm not keen on the concept of it, to be honest, but the principle that you know and have relationships with therapists either geographically around you or all across the country. I mean, there are lots of sort of online networks now for therapists. There's a counselling directory, online community, and various other ones as well. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of seeing other therapists as, not only sources of friendship and kind of CPD and professional development, they're also a way to refer to each other and to grow your practice too. Of course, when somebody locally Googles therapist in Cobham, in my case, they will see the other people that are around here. And from that point of view, they will compare us potentially. If they're not coming through word of mouth, if they're not being directly coming through a referral, they will be comparing me to other therapists. And those comparisons, it can be easy, I think, to get caught up in the sort of competition and comparison side of things. What does my website look like compared to them? Why would they choose me rather than them? Again, important things probably to bear in mind. But certainly for me, the local therapists here that I see, there is much more about how we can help each other. And that's really what's happened over time. Their clients that they see might have partners that they can't see because of a conflict of interest, and they'll be looking for a therapist, so they will refer them to me, and vice versa. So they're a really important source of other therapists, a really important source of building your practice. So I would suggest you get in touch with them. We have an organisation here locally called Surrey Counsellors and Psychotherapists Initiative, SCPI, and at the moment it's about 30 therapists and counsellors from the Elmbury, the local borough, and we all meet every couple of months and do an hour and a half of CPD, and then also have a tea or coffee. And then from that, I have separate supervision as well, peer supervision with some members of it. And as I say, that's great for CPD. It's great for perhaps sometimes the isolation that can come with working in private practice, certainly for me on my own. I live and work in the same place. So it's wonderful to be able to be around people who understand the business, who understand how therapy works and what it's like and the kind of challenges that you might be experiencing, which can be difficult for friends and family who don't have an awareness of the kind of therapeutic world. And as I say, it's a great source of referrals too. So bear all those in mind as far as setting up your private practice. And then, of course, there are bringing in people who are, as I say, Googling counsellor in Cobham because they have anxiety or have been diagnosed with it, for example. So from that point of view, how do you get strangers? I mean, it's a funny way to express it, but how do you get strangers to find you? I do think a website is important here. There are plenty of therapists who don't have websites, never have had them, but I like it. I set my website up in my third year of my 4-year diploma. Lots of reasons for doing that, which I think are quite good. There's a credibility to having a website out there if strangers are coming through. Also, friends and family or other therapists are referring people, to refer them to your website to have a look. I just think, as I say, you can put your qualifications there. You can answer lots of questions as far as your price, location, all those things. So lots of important information can be given to people, which it's the start of setting up a relationship with them, I suppose. it's also a great way to do the voice and visibility thing, to work out who you are, what kind of therapy you offer, why you believe it's helpful for people, and to express all of that in one place. It can look exactly how you want it to look, and I think that's an amazing thing. And of course, you can change it over time and develop it over time as well. So I think there are lots of things to be said, good things to be said for having a website. There are some relatively cheap people who provide it out there. Web Healer is a good company. I started really with the Web Healer website, and then over time, because it's quite a standard format, I had my own website developed just a few years ago, so it could look a lot more the way I wanted it to. But certainly, the majority of therapists that I know have a Web Healer website, and it does a really good job. And there are other providers as well. It's relatively inexpensive, and you can change things yourself too if you want to change a bit of text or whatever it might be. So, as I say, I think websites are important. The directories, again, being on the directories, I think you either need to be registered or accredited, but have a look at their requirements in order to do that. And as far as starting up a practice, I do think they can be quite important directories, and they are also another good reason why you might need a website too, because of course you write about yourself on the directory, but it's really good to have a link to a website that somebody can go through and see a lot more about you, and a lot more questions can be answered. So as far as the directories, UKCP, BACP have them. There are a number of other ones out there, Psychology Today, Find a Therapist. I'm now on UKCP, BACP, but also Counselling Directory. The Counselling Directory website is very good, I think. They have a lot of information on there as far as for people that are coming through for potential clients, lots and lots of information which has been provided about various mental health issues. And they're always looking at ways to get people to stay on the website, to get potential clients to stay on the website and go through to therapists. So you can also write articles for Counselling Directory too. So as I say, article writing, the way your practice might develop, media, social media, all those things I'll deal with in the next video, just from a timing point of view about developing your practice. But yes, so I think the directories are important, and then social media as well, potentially being on social media. As I say, some therapists don't want to go anywhere near social media, and I completely understand why they don't want to do that. In my experience, having those social media accounts, particularly Instagram, LinkedIn can be good for more academic things that you might write. Facebook potentially too. Twitter's a bit more difficult, but as I say, I will talk about that in my next video. So we're thinking about social media, whether to be on that. I think, in my personal experience, is quite a helpful thing to do, and it can be worth having a think about that if you want to start building your profiles there. Okay, so in the last sort of 10 minutes, I just wanted to finish off with a few things, and that is transitioning from a job to a private practice, then looking also at where you might choose to locate your practice and your price that you might choose as well. So if you're looking at the first one of those, which is transitioning from, say, full-time employment to private practice, it can be something that really stops people doing it, actually. So it's really worth thinking about that now, as early as possible. And that can involve potentially, if it is possible to be doing that, saving money now. It's not, I don't think, this huge expense as far as the cost of setting up a private practice. People do, of course there are costs. The website will cost something. You may have room rent that you have to start paying. You won't necessarily have it full as far as clients that have come through. So there are directories. If you want to go onto them, there are costs that will need to be there. But actually, the difficulty for most people isn't necessarily the costs just of setting up the private practice. It's more the fact that they won't have an income if they give over a few days or the whole week to these new clients in a private practice. So it's important to think about it as early as you can, as far as I say, putting a pot of money together to make that transition easier. That's not possible for everybody, of course, to save up money and then to stop their job and then to fill these 5 days a week, if indeed that's what somebody wants to work in their private practice. So from the point of view of some other alternatives, we've all heard a lot about hybrid working, and I would say that there are two examples of that here that can work very well. The first one would be to continue in your existing job for 3 days, 4 days potentially, and then give over a day or two. I guess ideally to, at least at the start, to your private practice and getting clients in. Of course, lots of good things about that. It takes the pressure off as far as setting up your practice. You can sort of gradually ease into the change from employee or student to business owner and running your own practice, and to make that transition as easy as possible for people, I think is a good thing. So if that is possible, it's not going to be possible, of course, in every job, but if that is possible, I do think that's worth thinking about. There will be holding the tension between clients coming through and your private practice, and then also the demands of an ongoing job. But those will need to be challenges might need to be negotiated, but having an income, having that structured place, having that familiar place that as far as your continuing employment, I think can be quite a good idea, at least initially. And maybe that you always choose to do that. That is the great thing about private practice as well in terms of flexibility. We don't have to do 5 days a week in private practice. You can choose to do all manner range of things. And so that the next one, as far as hybrid, would be working, ending your existing job and then going into work as a therapist within an organisation for a few days a week, and then giving over a couple of days to private practice, sort of working around that with your private practice. So again, that can be a really good idea for various reasons. You could get referrals potentially, the people that the therapists within the organisation that you'd be working for, they can refer you. It's all contacts. It's all great for building your community. I think that can be a really good way too. They will have assessments within that, and risk assessments and all those types of things, which can be helpful for your private practice too. You may be able to get them from the placements that you're doing, or indeed be making up your own. But as I say, I can see why people do work within organisations as well as having their own private practice on another couple of days a week. There is something about private practice, as I say, living and working alone at home. Of course you see your clients, but the relationship is different than it would be to work colleagues or peers or friends. So other ways to have this sort of community can be really helpful. So that's the transition. The other thing that I think is important to look at is location. When I first started, I was in actually 3 different locations. I was in Cobham here where I live, in a clinic with a number of other different practitioners, Reiki practitioners, somebody who did makeup, massage therapist, osteopath, various people. And then I was in CCPE where I trained, and I was also in East London in Shoreditch because I wanted to be available for those people that work in the city, that sort of client group. That's where I came from. I used to work in the city, so I thought it would be a good client group too. So, there were great things about that at the beginning. There were a different client group, generally city people. In Shoreditch, actually more creatives. When I was at CCPE, it was good to be able to get referrals from my organisation. Again, the more you can get clients from external ways, the better. And one of those ways can be, as I say, in terms of therapists that you already know from your training institution, but you have to work there. That's what I had to do at CCPE. And then in Cobham. And that was great here too, working for a clinic here, working within a clinic, because there were other therapists there who I then got to meet and talk to. And, the osteopath might be talking to somebody who was obviously in psychological distress too. And they could say, oh, well, there's a therapist here next door. So that worked very well for me for a while, and all really, really good ways of building up your group, building up your tribe, building up your community. Over time, I have, as I say, I work 5 days a week in a therapy room at home because from a commuting point of view, it's much less complicated as far as being in different places. It means I don't have room rent. Each of those places I was paying room rent, so it increases the sort of profit from each hour. And there are no restrictions on when I can use the room, those kind of things. So lots of good choice, flexibility, congruence, those things which are really good with working from home. But as I say, working from different places, I think is a great way to start, certainly. And it may be that you continue to do that throughout your career. And then finally, there's price. Price is an interesting one. What we don't want to do is for you to undervalue yourself, I think. Look, I know you're starting out, and therefore it can go, this transition from going to student to actually receiving money from somebody can be a really big deal psychologically. So I think it's important not to undervalue yourself, to realise that if you've done a psychotherapy qualification, it's taken 4 years part-time plus probably a foundation year, 5 years training. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it requires a lot of psychological, emotional, physical energy. So I wouldn't undervalue that at all. I think, and there are costs to setting up your practice and being in private practice that are also within that hourly rate. It's not all going into your pocket, so to speak. So make sure you don't undervalue yourself. Of course, you'll be looking at locally to see what other people charge. If somebody's coming through word of mouth and referral, they might pay a bit more than the average rate locally. And over time, I've been able to increase my rate locally as well. It's a good idea to put into your contract that you can increase your rate every January if that's what you want to do. But if you're looking at price, important, as I say, to bear in mind not to undervalue yourself, to make sure probably at least initially that you are in line with the other therapists locally, but to hold in mind as well when you're looking at developing your business and growing your business, you really can start to put your rate up. And again, I will talk about that as far as the development of your practice and what might happen in the future. When I started out, actually, because I started in my third year for the private practice, they did limit the amount of money, the institution that I trained at, it limited the amount of money you were able to charge, which meant I was low cost effectively. So actually I did start out doing a Google AdWords campaign for low cost therapy, and it did bring quite a few people in. So if I do think it's worth starting, if you can, if that's practically possible, to start your practice as early as possible. As I say, for me, where I trained, it was in the third year. I could start doing that. And of course, these are lower rates, so you won't be making the income that you might in a few years' time, but everybody that you see is a potential source of referral, and they may come back. So I think it can be helpful to see things in that way. Okay. Look, there are a number of other practical things like data protection, insurance, storage of data, documents, all of those things, which of course are necessary as part of setting up a private practice as well. The thing is to talk about them in detail here. I would just be going through a list of things. So what I've done instead is I put a link to a website, which I think is really helpful, which lists lots of those things, and you can work through them. Of course, ask other people about them and get advice on them. But I didn't think they were that great a use of time as far as this video. So look, the thing I would say to hold in mind with all of this is that the fundamentals, as I say, as far as psychologically, really do take care of yourself. Make sure that you're living a life that you enjoy to the extent that you can. In order to set up and grow your private practice, we need to be able to focus, to be able to trust ourselves, trust others, really believe in yourself. So we need to be managing that fear part, that anxious part, and just taking the best of it as far as the messages that come from it. We need to be managing our fear. We need to be being as creative as we can. So whatever in life enables you to do that, and to be in that place, I would be really encouraging you to do it. And I absolutely believe that if you love what you do, you'll be good at it usually, and that this will grow over time and that it will absolutely happen. In terms of other advice about it, I do run a sort of consulting service on an hourly basis for as number of hours as you might want or need. So do contact me through the website about that if you would like to look at the more other practical things, or the psychological aspects as well, and working on that for you, any obstacles that might be in the way there, or developing your creativity, or how to work on focus, all of these things, or relationships too. As I've said, relationships are so important, I think, from the point of view of setting up your practice. So many of us in relationships have had difficult experiences in early experience. That's the reason we've come into therapy. So if there are issues around that for you, you've been working on them throughout your training, throughout the therapy that you've been having through your training. But if there's still things that you need or want to look at there as far as relationship, for example, the relationship with self, of course, the relationship with others, which I think is really all therapy is about, then we can also look at those in terms of these consulting sessions as well. So I wish you all the best with it. I really hope it's been helpful, and thank you for listening, and do take care.